Now, President Biden's son, convicted felon Hunter Biden, faces 9 charges in California in a federal tax fraud trial. It begins on September 5th, if his attorneys fail to get that delayed. President Biden went to Delaware last night to see Hunter. The New York Post cover shows the two hugging with the headline, "First Felon." Joe Biden with this statement after the verdict: "I will accept the outcome of this case and will continue to respect the judicial process as Hunter considers an appeal." Biden said last week that he would not pardon his son. One of the jurors talked with Fox.
You can't help but take some of these things as a factor, you look at it, look at this thing. And then at some point where you just got to turn away, and focus more on what the defense is saying, what the prosecution's saying. Nobody's above the law, no matter who you are. So that did not play a factor in my decision. It was not politically motivated. Politics played no part in this whatsoever.
Nobody's above the law. Remember, the last time we heard that was from President Biden 2 Fridays ago. Special counsel David Weiss also talked after the verdict.
This case was about the illegal choices defendant made while in the throes of addiction, his choice to lie on a government form when he bought a gun, and the choice to then possess that gun. It was these choices and the combination of guns and drugs that made his conduct dangerous. No one in this country is above the law. Everyone must be accountable for their actions, even this defendant.
Hunter Biden's attorney says they will pursue all legal challenges, which likely would include an appeal. A sentencing date has not yet been set. Welcome, Jonathan Turley, Fox News contributor, constitutional law attorney, and George Washington University law professor. Jonathan, great to see you. You and I were together. We had a bunch of people on the screen. We were talking about this when this happened. A few hours have passed since then. Your top thought?
Well, what's fascinating about the decision to go forward with the trial is that it put at risk the chance that Hunter Biden could very well be sentenced to jail. I've said all along that I believe that there is a real possibility here of a prison sentence. The best shot he had to reduce that likelihood was to plead guilty, which is why all the way up to the beginning of this trial, I was writing, you need to plead guilty. I mean, this is a lead pipe cinch of a case. You can get a 2-level departure, as it's called, to plead guilty, and that would make it easier for the court to give you probation. He decided to put on a nullification defense, and it failed. But he then lost that departure. And so the judge is going to be in a tough position here. She has sentenced people to jail for this offense.
Let's talk about the judge for just a second and previous cases like this. You might find a situation where you're a first-time offender, the charges are stacked against you, you didn't take the plea deal, blah, 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 however sweetheart it was. But one of the main factors in this from our coverage yesterday as this was breaking came from Judge Jeanine Pirro. She said, if he had pled guilty, you get points for that in the judge's mind and the scope of what happens with sentencing. Was it bad judgment? Was it up to him? I mean, what happens behind the scenes when you have a shot to not face a trial?
Well, there are reports out today that many of the Biden family believed that a Delaware jury would not convict Hunter Biden. This is, after all, Bidentown. This is their hometown. This is the son of the favorite son of Delaware. And so I think that there were some people in the family that were shocked by the quick verdict. In my view, this was not worth the risk because this is not someone that defense counsel is going to want to see given a prison stint. But the best way to avoid that is to plead guilty, get those points with the judge. Remember, this judge watched that sweetheart deal fall apart in her courtroom. She triggered it. She simply asked the prosecutor, have you ever seen a deal like this? And he said no. And the whole thing just burst into flames. And then she sat there and watched them put on an obvious nullification defense, trying to get the jury just to ignore the evidence. None of that's going to play well with the judge in determining whether to sentence Hunter to jail. And the guidelines, under the federal sentencing guidelines, suggest that such a sentence is warranted. Now, they're discretionary. The judge doesn't have to follow them. But none of that helps when it comes to that decision by the judge.
And now that the jurors are talking, we're getting some real insight on no one is above the law, for example, what things mattered and what things didn't. Those shiny objects known as family members in the courtroom gave their love and their support, and that is a blessing. But they're not evidence, we heard the prosecution say. Yeah, I mean, none of it worked, as you said. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg here in New York and prosecutor Matthew Colangelo have both agreed to publicly testify before the House Judiciary Committee next month. And the hearing is set on July 12th, one day after former President Trump faces sentencing for those 34 charges in his New York criminal trial. House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan says, and this is a quote, "This hearing will examine actions by state and local prosecutors to engage politically motivated prosecutions of federal officials." What do you make of this? And what could we get out of it? People are kind of becoming numb to Congress's hearings. Is this one going to deliver something that we might not think of?
Well, these hearings have a habit of turning into sort of a primal scream session between the two parties. And there's a fear that that's going to happen here. Look, you're not going to have a Perry Mason moment. You're not going to have Colangelo saying, I was dispatched to dispatch Trump, or Bragg to say, yeah, I know that there wasn't a crime here, but I'm elected and I had to do something. None of that's going to happen. They're going to deny having any direction. And by the way, you didn't need to have direction in this case. The politics for Bragg were all too obvious. He threw a flag on this case. His predecessor stopped the case going forward. So Bragg had already expressed his skepticism, and then his lead prosecutor resigned, wrote, in my view, an unethical book while this case was still pending to pressure him, and it worked, and he caved. Is he going to fess up to all that? Of course not. He's going to say, as the jury found, there was a real crime here. So we're going to have to wait for the appellate process. Trump is going to have a hard initial time, I expect, in this Trump system. It has not garnered a lot of faith for many of us. But I think ultimately it'd be hard for this verdict to be sustained through state and federal appeals.
Well, thank you for breaking that down. I think people will want to hear from these people because even in other blue cities, you see district attorneys like them making some similar type decisions and soft on crime that Alvin Bragg is so known for. So we'll cover it. Absolutely. Jonathan Turley, it's always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Harris.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.